Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland met her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi in Bangkok today. It's the first time the two have spoken since Canada arrested Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou and the subsequent detentions of Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor by Beijing. Freeland described the meeting as a frank exchange of views and said the two are committed to speaking further. Are icy diplomatic tensions between Canada and China beginning to thaw, and what needs to happen next? Charles Burton is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a former diplomat to China, and he joins us by Skype from Haliburton, Ontario. Thank you very much for joining us today, sir. I want to jump right in and ask you, Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland met face-to-face with her Chinese counterpart. Is this a sign that there is some progress here?
Oh, I think it's a lot better that Chrystia Freeland has been able to get a meeting with her Chinese counterpart than the situation over the past 7 months where she hasn't. So, one hopes that this is a sign that the Chinese government is seeing that their policy of hostage diplomacy with Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor is not leading to any progress in releasing, getting Meng Wanzhou back to Beijing. And therefore, it's time to try and see if they can recover Canada-China relations in a way that serves Chinese interests. And there's another issue, which is that neither country has an ambassador in place in the other's capital. Since John McCallum resigned at the end of January, we haven't been able to get any new ambassador in Beijing to further our interests there. And then the Chinese government promoted the Canadian ambassador, their ambassador in Canada, Lu Xiaoye, to ambassador to Paris. And so they don't have anyone in Ottawa. And I would think that the Chinese would like to have an ambassador in Ottawa to further their interests. And of course, we would demand that they accept a candidate that we'll be proposing to be our ambassador in Beijing.
Both Chrystia Freeland and Wang Yi were on the sidelines of a meeting in Bangkok. And so there was an avenue for them to have some FaceTime. But, previously, Chrystia Freeland has tried to reach out to her Chinese counterpart, couldn't get a phone call, couldn't get a meeting, even though they happened to be at this same thing. What has changed over the past, since December, that now the Chinese are willing to meet with her?
Well, I think the Chinese have certainly been trying to engage through Canadians that they regard as sympathetic to their interests. So, we've heard suggestions by Prime Minister Mulroney that former Prime Minister Chrétien and André Desmarais of the Power Corporation and honorary head of the Canada-China Business Council go and negotiate on Canada's behalf, and that hasn't got anywhere. And then we've also had statements by former Ambassador McCallum suggesting that Canada should either, have a political intervention in the judicial process of Ms. Meng's extradition hearing to get her back to Beijing sooner, or suggesting that we pressure the Americans to drop the charges against her. And that hasn't gone anywhere either. So I think the Chinese government may be realizing that they really have to deal with our foreign minister if they want to make any progress on this file. And as their relations with the United States continue to deteriorate with the trade war, I think there's more and more interest in Beijing in trying to bring the Canadian relationship back on track as a way to, in some way, counter what's going on between the U.S. and China today.
What should Canadians look for publicly in terms of a sign that the meeting between Freeland and Wang Yi went well?
Well, I think any movement with regard to Kovrig and Spavor would be good. If we hear that the Chinese government is going to bring them to some sort of trial, that would be positive, because in the past, with other cases of foreigners who've been held in China on these sort of spurious grounds, including our own Kevin Garrett, once they brought it up to trial, then they decided to deport the foreigner back to their own country. So I think we really have to look for any kind of action on this matter. And I suspect that anything we see will be a positive indication that the Chinese government wants to get back into trying to recover the Canada-China relationship, which, of course, at present is not functioning for them in any way in terms of enhanced trade relations or the other issues that they want to pursue with us.
In terms of a change with the situation involving Michael Kovrig or Michael Spavor, is it realistic that Canadians could see a change or a development in the cases against both of them anytime soon? Is that realistically something that Canadians could see soon?
Absolutely. I think it's realistic in the sense that it's pretty clear that there's absolutely no basis for them to be detained. So the Chinese government cannot engage in any kind of judicial proceeding against them that will be anything less than a show trial, because they're not guilty of these serious charges that has been alleged against them, according to everything that Canada knows. And I think there's also the question of trade. The banning of the import of Canadian canola seeds and of all Canadian meats have been done on utterly spurious grounds with no scientific basis whatsoever, in flagrant violation of China's commitment to the WTO. So these are all things that could be changed rapidly, because there's no basis for the Chinese government to continue with them, because Canada is not at fault in any of this.
Even though if Canada is not at fault and Canada is not the reason Meng Wanzhou is currently in custody right now, Beijing over the past since this started back in December, Beijing doesn't seem to particularly care that Canada may be collateral damage in all of this. But one thing I want to ask you, Canada has gone out of its way to avoid escalating these tensions. If there's no short-term improvement in the Canada-China relationship, should Canada consider retaliation of its own?
Well, I think that certainly our current policy, after so many months, if this meeting between Ms. Freeland and Mr. Wong is not an indication of something to change, possibly with a view to the Chinese preferring the Liberals in power than the Conservative Party in the next election, as the Conservatives have said, a reset with China is a major part of their party program plank for foreign affairs, that we could see some progress. If we don't see any progress, then I think that because there's been successive retaliations against Canada, it's time for Canada to start to do something on our own. And one of the issues is the fentanyl issue that China has not been collaborating with us on, despite us giving them some aid a few years ago to encourage investigation. So I think we'd have good basis to start inspecting all Chinese shipments into Canada for fentanyl, which would put the Chinese product coming into our country at a comparative disadvantage and provide some economic leverage in this matter. So, that's something we could legitimately do. There are a number of other areas in which we could be clamping down on mainland Chinese money laundering and real estate acquisitions with funds of doubtful provenance connected to the senior levels of the regime. We have laws in place for those things. We haven't been pursuing these matters to the extent that I think we could. And then we should also crack down on agents of the Chinese state operating in Canada that we know have been harassing Canadians of Chinese origin for some years now. And so far, our government has not seen fit to declare any Chinese diplomats persona non grata or pursue any of these other agents. So, while we can't retaliate the way China is retaliating against us by, violating our commitment to the WTO or arbitrarily arresting people, there are things that we can do that would express to the Chinese regime that we are not happy with how they're proceeding, and that if they want a smoother Canada-China relationship that is in their interest, that they should start complying with the international norms. And that Ms. Meng's case has got to be handled in accordance with Canadian law. And, once the process is over, either she'll be sent to the United States, where she'll face a due process, or she'll be returned to Beijing, because we've found through a due process of law that she's not eligible for extradition.
All right, we'll leave the conversation there for now. Charles Burton of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, thank you very much for your time today.
Good to speak with you, Katie.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.